So James, first off, could you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about yourself?
I'm James Patterson. I was born on the 4th of October 1930, so I'm 93 at the moment, and the life goes on one day after another, and I married Mary Marshall from Beera, just 5 miles away, and we've had a great married life together. It went very well, and hope it continues for a long time to come. But if you want to know, James A. Patterson is nearly every place. But when I went to the academy in those days, you had to do an entrance exam on the first day, and we all did it. And the next morning, the headmaster came in with the exam papers, and he went to one chap and he says, "You're James Patterson?" And the boy said, "Yes." He says, "Have you another name?" And no, he says, "I haven't." And he came to me and he says, "Is that your exam paper?" And I says, "It is." "Have you another name?" And I says, "I have." "Andrew." "Well," he says, "as long as you're in this school, you're James Andrew, and this other chap's Patterson." That was to distinguish between the two of us. Yeah. So it gave me a habit, and I've used James A. ever since. Yeah. But that was my beginning of my life in Seskinore. I lived here in Letfern, which the family have been here since 1740. That's from they arrived, and in my early days, it was my father and mother and Jean, who was almost 2 years older than me, and my Uncle William, and we all ate up in the dining room, and the people who were working on the farm, they were in the kitchen, and they were well fed there too. So I used to hurry up and eat my meal to get away down, because there was more crack in the kitchen than there was around the dining room table. So,
now, James, could you tell us what it was like growing up in Letfern?
Letfern, we always had a lot of people around the place, and my father was a very regular church attender at Seskinore Presbyterian, and I remember he and Jean and I climbing over snowdrifts that were on the road for over 7 days at one time. But he made us climb over these to get to Seskinore, and we were there in time and so forth. But I also remember a lady who lived on her own on one of our small houses here, and Lizzie Grimes, and Lizzie, we always liked to escape over to Lizzie because she had always white bread, and she put plenty of butter and sugar on it, and boy, we loved that. And then as soon as we had it eaten, we were away home as hard as we could go. But my Uncle William, he never let people sit, and he was always doing something. You played football on the farmyard outside, you played croquet in the lawn, you played handball against the wall, when you had to stay inside, we played a lot of Monopoly over the winter, and I remember the first game of Monopoly we played, and we started one night at 6 o'clock, and we played to 10 because that you had to go to bed at 10, and they started the next night at 6 o'clock, and we got finished at 8:30, and that was a great accomplishment. But we played an awful lot of Monopoly at that time. But William was like that, and if there was any visitors came along, he always ensured that they did something. They just didn't come to talk. There was a bit of crack, and he would have croquet in the lawn, and he would have umpteen things going on. But so there was never a dull moment about Letfern in those days. And then later in life, he would take us to the Northwest 200 motorbike race, and that was fantastic for going up there and going to the motorbike race and watching them go around the thing and so forth. But I remember my grandfather in his 90s, and he promised us that for Christmas he was going to buy us a bicycle each, Jean and I. And here he died very suddenly. And the first words I said to William was, "Will we not get our bicycles now?" and William says, "Oh, I think you will." We got them for Christmas at that stage. But no, there was never a dull moment with William around the place now. He was very good that way, and so forth. And there was always people about, because the main horseman was Johnny Terry, and he lived in one of our houses, and he had a big family of about four of a family, and he also was responsible for going to Fintona on a Tuesday and Oma on a Saturday. And what did he take with him? But we churned all our milk and made butter and buttermilk, and he went round the houses in Oma and sold the butter and buttermilk to the people there, and they came out of their houses every time. He didn't have to knock their doors. They were looking for this, because home baking was the end thing. And then the model bakery, every Saturday they got 20 gallons of buttermilk to do their baking. So there was always plenty going on. And the like of Johnny and another chap that worked here, and there was always dinner provided for them, and you were when the Escra bell rang at 12, there was no real watches in those times, but if they were working with the horses, the horses heard the bell and they wiggled their ear, so the boys knew to bring the horses into the yard, and that was at 12 o'clock, and so forth. And then they came into the house, and the horses had been fed, and nobody moved until 10 past 12, so that the horses got time to rest in that stage. I remember that okay. But there was always a routine that you went through in those days. But many's another thing happened which is too numerous to mention.
Okay, and have you any other stories about growing up in Letfern?
Oh, I have an interesting one now. The youngest son of Johnny Terry's that I've been telling you about, the horseman, and he was born with a hair lip in those days, and my father took him to the Royal Victoria Hospital in Belfast, and they fixed him up reasonably well, very well, but he came home and he went on to school, and when he was finished, he went into a branch of the priesthood, and he was allowed to wear the round collar, and he was all his days down in Tipperary, down there. But he came back to see me every August, and this particular August he arrived back And I said, "Oh, hello, Matt, come on in." And he says, "James, can I bring my niece in with me from Australia?" Well, I says, if she's from Ramsay Street, bring her in. And she spoke up and she says, "I'm from Ramsay Street." And I says, "How did that come?" Well, she says, "I teach in that school that you see on television on Neighbours."
Yes.
And it's bedlam. They try and film at the weekends, but if they don't, it's bedlam to get it finished at the beginning of the week.
Yes.
But it was lovely to see her and Matt as well. But I remember Johnny then, the children grew up and away, and Johnny moved work and he joined the railway, and he was killed in that disaster at the Omagh railway station when the train came in the fog, and Johnny was one of the 4 workmen who was killed there, and so forth. And I remember they put up a stone tablet to him years later, and I was down at it and met the family, all the family again were there. So it was lovely to meet up with them. Yes. Okay.
So James, could you tell us a bit about transport and how that's changed over the years?
Oh, the transport. Well, I remember my father bought an old, a new Ford car a way back in the 20s before I was born, and there was only canvas doors on it and so forth. And then when Jean and I were born, my mother says I can't go out in that car because I'm blowing out of it, and he put it into a shed, and he bought a Morris Oxford, and it was bigger but was warmer, and he liked that. But as for the farm, the horses changed to Fords and tractor in those days, and that started a new revolution in farming when the tractor arrived and so forth. And I remember my uncle really was the man who drove the tractor and so forth. And I had to go away someplace one day, and I was at Everfroy School, and he says, "I'll get you out of school and you drive the tractor because this flax puller must be kept going, but don't get off the seat of the tractor. If anything goes wrong with the flax puller, let them fix it, but you drive." So I drove the tractor the whole day, and boy, I loved it.
Yes.
And we had no mishaps, and we got a good day's work done. But then other implements got onto it, and it was much easier to handle farming in those days when you had the tractor and you didn't have to rest it. You just could let it work away and do the thing. But as for changing, you see, the potatoes and coke, and then come wartime, you see, and the government were persuading us to farm more and get more food for the table, and the potatoes, and then we grew a lot of flax because in the war they wanted the fibre of the flax to make parachutes in those days, and we also grew long tan seed oats. Maybe you never heard of it, but this was long tan, and in those days the farmers up at Carrickmore weren't able to keep seed enough. I don't know why, but to sow for the next year's crop, and we had all our grain was long tan, and we cleaned it and bagged it and took it to Beera Station and sent umpteen bags up to Carrickmore Station, and then they left it there. And they always, the money always came for every bag that they got. There's a decent lot of people up there, and it was funny, there was a whole lot of them called by the same name, but they always had a nickname of it. So if it was Joe McConnell, it was Joe McConnell Pat, or Johnny. They always put a name after it because there were so many of them they had a bit distinguished between them.
Yeah.
But that was the way it got on. But then the farming changed again a bit when in the war, and we were still sending milk to Oma, and we couldn't sell the butter unless the people who were buying it could give us the BUs, because these were tickets that the government gave them to buy these. So we had to gather up the BUs coupons and send it into the Department of Agriculture in those days to keep the thing working. And so there was always plenty of background work and all these things. And but I always remember we did have good crack. The tea came out to the field when we were gathering potatoes, and now I've just forgotten the name of the family, but there was a couple of young boys there, and boy, they could eat. And my mother was going round with bread, extra bread, and she said to Michael, here's another bit of bread. Oh no, it says I'm full, I can't take any more. And try George there, he'll take it. Why, is he not full? Oh, he would eat anything. But these are the things that went on anyway, and very well.
So James, could you tell us about your memories of the Second World War?
I remember a wee bit about it, surely, because I remember the day it started on the 3rd of September 39, yes, and I was ready to go to school, and my father had been listening to the radio, and they had announced that we were at war with Germany, and he shouted at me when I was right through the door, we're at war with Germany. Well, do you know this? I had to sit down on the second step of the stairs, and I thought we'd all be killed. But after 5 minutes, I got up and I went walked down to Seskinore to the school, and that is all. But the next morning, there was a telegram had arrived, and our relations in South Africa sent this telegram to say that you're at war, and send the young people, and that included the Mitchells of Rockmore, because we were related to the Mitchells of Rockmore. Send the young people of the Pattersons and the Mitchells to South Africa till the war's over, that they'll be safe out here. And now the whole course of life could have changed if we had been sent, but neither the Mitchell parents nor the Patterson parents decided they would keep us at home. So we stayed here, and we're here ever since. But that was it. But there was plenty going on in the wartime, and then things were scarce too, but everybody got as much as one. Maybe not in the city, because I knew nothing about that, but my mother had a couple of sisters in Belfast, and she would send them a parcel of food every now and again. But how the rest of the people survived in those days, I have no idea. But life went on. And then a peculiar thing, the chickens were out in the fields and hen houses. And this particular Sunday night, my mother and I went out to herd them into the chicken house before it got dark. And when I got them in, I ran up to the top of the hill and stayed a minute and came down again. And my mother says, "What are you doing up there?" And I says, "Well, there's a peculiar sound in the sky tonight because I had heard aeroplanes going across from America because we're really in a track of the aeroplanes coming from America through here, and the peculiar sound." And the next morning was the word about the big bombing in Belfast, that the Germans had come over and bombed Belfast. And then there was panic. Did my mother's sister get killed in this bombing? And so my father was sent to send a telegram from Seskinore to Belfast to see if they were living, but they survived. Thank you. But that was that. But the army really were round quite a bit, and so forth in those days. But other than that, life was quite normal, to tell you the truth, in those days.
Johnny, I can remember the army, some of the soldiers brought us oranges and down to Bear School, and we hadn't had oranges for ages because you couldn't get any here. That's my particular memory of the soldier. So, yes, and they were blood red oranges. And I thought to myself, oh, they're poisoned, and didn't want to eat it because of the colour, you see.
That was an unusual colour, yes.
Unusual colour.
Okay. James, can you tell us about the Americans being around here in the Second World War?
Oh, I remember the Americans very well because they were dressed differently to all the other troops, and they were billeted around the house. They weren't really the people who were there, they weren't the American fighters, but they were the army, because they built a big store, a very big store for those days, and part of the floors there yet, if you're parking the car in the main car park and the concrete not broken, that's the concrete that the Americans put down, and there's bits of it still there, and that was their food store to feed all the American troops that came to Northern Ireland. And in fact, they bought their potatoes from us, and nearly every Saturday morning the Ford Ferguson tractor and trailer and bags of potatoes were taken down to this big store, and seeing it was Saturday, I really went down with whoever was going all the time, mostly my uncle, and put the potatoes in there. There was one hitch one time, because there was a big frost, and here it frosted the potatoes between our house and the thing, and they weren't fit to eat them. Now they were very cross, but they were back for more the next week, and that was going. But the Americans made themselves well known, and they were great church attenders. They went to the chapel and the Church of Ireland and the Presbyterian, and my father, he was the treasurer at that time of the Presbyterian church, and he was delighted to see them because they always paid well in dollars, and a few pound was from outsiders were always very useful in running the place, but often said that he was delighted to see the dollars, and they paid well at that time. So yeah, we had a good time with the Americans here. And I was cycling to school this particular day, and I was going down, as we call it, where Waddle Sheep Dip was. There's a big modern house built there now, and we always got Picture Post, Picture magazine. There was no write-up on it, but there was always pictures on it every week about the war, and I knew Patton and Eisenhower and Montgomery and all the main leaders. They were all over these Picture Posts. And here, this particular morning, as I was cycling to Oma, there was 3 very big cars coming meeting me, and I put my foot on the grass and stopped. And here on the second car, who was sitting in the back seat? Only President and General Eisenhower in those days. And he didn't wave to me now, but I knew him. And so I had no invitation to America. I'm sorry about that. Okay.
James, could you tell us about the time that you met President Mary McAleese?
Oh, I can't. Surely I'll never forget it. We had this invitation from her for James and Mary, and I'm sure you can't read that there anyway, but to Harrison Neutron in Phoenix Park, and going to Dublin was no trouble because we have relations living down there, and Mary's brothers living there for a long number of years, but we were invited to Harrison Neutron with President Mary McAleese, and that was a great afternoon tea that she had for us. And you were queuing up naturally, and you introduced yourself to them and her husband. And oh boy, it was a November day and it was very cold, and Mary was shaking. And Mary says, "Listen, Mary, away over to that big fire and warm yourself." and Mary wasn't long going over and warmed herself. And then the room was huge, and we went from it into another place where the afternoon tea was, and now there was 4 chairs in this room, and there was really only 40 people, and that was well planned because you couldn't sit down. You had to move around and talk to the people that were there. So we met a lot of interesting people, and they were all dying to talk. And then she, when she had greeted everybody coming in, she came and she just mixed in with the rest of us, and had a yarn with, said hello to us all as she went around. And then we went back into this first big room again, and she made a great speech welcoming us, and said goodbye. It was time then to leave. But it was a visitation that I never forgotten, and I'll go again if I get another one.
So James, as a farmer, you'll have spent a lot of time talking about the weather. Can you tell us about the most memorable weather events over the years?
Oh, well, when you're young, you think everything is a big thing, and I'm sure it was too in those days. But you hear on the television nowadays there's a storm coming, and there's a flood coming, and there's a snowstorm coming, but you never heard anything then until it arrived. But it came, because I remember my uncle telling me that in 1922 they bought a bit of land from the colonel, and there was a huge big shed on it, and there was a mighty wind, and it blew the whole shed away, and they were terribly disappointed because they were looking forward to hold a lot of stuff in this big shed, but they also remember a huge snowstorm, and that's the snowstorm I mentioned at the beginning when we were going to, because the road to Seskinore and the road to our house were completely blocked, and there wasn't anybody could go up or down them for the guts of 10 days because it didn't thaw. It was just stationary there. And I remember the workmen and my father and uncle, and they shoveled the snow out over the hedge on the short wee lane from the house up to the main road to get it cleared, and they cleared it. And well, I suppose it gives them something to do as well, but they cleared it. But if you're asking my opinion, I'm not just sold out on climate change, because I also remember there was one winter, there was an awful frost, and here we did a fair bit of ploughing, and it was March before we were able to plough anything for that year's crop, but it was a severe frost, and it lasted for months or more, and that's it. I can't tell you the date of it, but it was the biggest frost I heard. Well, then about 4 or 5 years ago, we also had a terrible severe frost, and everything was frozen up, and it was an absolute torture getting the milking parlour going and so forth, and all the heaters of the house was assigned to it. However, we're able to get over it and so forth. But it just shows you, television now can tell you what's coming before it happens, and they make a big story of it. But climate and days, it just came and went, the same as it did in the olden times, and the same nowadays. Only it's not as severe. You hear nowadays of the floods that are hitting many places, and the houses that are found. Unfortunately, I think most of the houses were built in recent years on low-lying ground, and once the rain came, there was no way but they were going to be flooded, and the thing. So, and you hear more about the flooding just for that way that it happened. But there was plenty of peculiar weather all my lifetime. So it'll carry on like that to the end of time.
Well, James, could you tell us a bit about Seskinore?
Seskinore, well, there was always plenty going on about Seskinore, and Master and Mrs. Greer were the headmaster and mistress in the school there, and Mrs. Greer, she played the organ in the Church of Ireland there, so that was a very useful thing for them, and the Roman Catholic school was just across the road from the Protestant school, and we all got to know each other very well, and the families walked home many a day together, and the Clarys and the Donnellys and the Mullins and the Riddles and the Gallaghers and the Pattersons will all come up this wee road here, so we had always good fun usually, but it was a mile's walk for us, and some of the other ones like the Riddles had nearly 2 miles to walk, but that's the way we went to school. And there was 3 places of worship: the Church of Ireland, the Roman Catholic Church, and the Presbyterian, all in Seskinore, and we all got on very well together, and Presbyterians had a sale of work every year coming up to Christmas. This was to raise a wee bit of money to keep the place going, and the Roman Catholic Church had the same sale of work probably the next week, and we went to it, and you bought bits and pieces that were sitting there for that time. And then for the people who lived in the place, the McLean's shop and the Grugans were the early postman, postmistress and so forth, and they had the post office there, and there was a chap by the name of Montgomery, and we called him the Field Marshal Montgomery, but he worked up about the McClintock estate, and the McLeans had a shop, and eventually Herbie ran the post office for years, and then there was Robert Bratton, and he wrote a book to get it published, and the publishers were happy enough to do it, and it was around the Turf Fire, and there was a great, Bob Bratton had a great interest in education in those days, and then we had Pat McCusker, and he was a bit of a historian and still is, and Pat knows a lot about history, and he was kicking about, but he's always a great man for a yarn. I've met Pat often and so forth. And then to the modern day, Jim Riddle was arrived home from America in the early days, and he started to farm, but he was quite interested, a bit like my Uncle William. People had to be doing something, and Jim started the bowling club in Seskinore. He started the table tennis club. He started the youth club, and that really wasn't enough for him as well, but he loved to see young people going overseas to broaden their outlook on life, and would finance some of them to do that. So Jim Riddle is a great asset, and he's 95 now, and he's still going strong and driving his car around, and a very smart brain on his head. We also had another chap here, D.O. McCracken, we called him, and he farmed down the Oma Road a wee bit. But David was a different chap. He had a great personality to speak to people and to motivate them and to hit them on the backside if he thought they weren't doing it right, and he wasn't scared to tell you if he thought you were wrong. So he was a great motivator with everybody in Seskinore, D.O. McCracken. We miss him very much so in that respect. But there were always, as you went a bit wider, there was always plenty of people lived just outside the village here and there, and farms, and most of them did in farms and so forth. But seeing we were just 7.5, 8 miles out of Oma, the Oma people started to come back, and the Barker started a garage there, and went very well, and they did a lot of repairs for the people, and so it was a fairly intensive wee village for that time. So that's not them all, but I can't mention them all to you.
Well, can you tell us what you remember about the McClintock family?
Well, I remember the McClintocks, and the McClintock, Colonel McClintock always went to the Harvest Thanksgiving in the Church of Ireland, and that's where he worshipped up and down. But he had a seat in the back seat on the right, and it was raised 2 feet above all the other seats, and nobody dared go into that seat, only him. And any of his relations, they were in that seat with him, but he was there, and he did that. And but I remember I wasn't that old when he died, but the church was a very small place, and I think I was only 6 when he died. But my father and my grandfather were allocated 2 seats in the church, and my father says, now your grandfather can't walk too far, and I'll leave you and him at the church, and you take my place in the church, and I'll drive the car away because I'll not be allowed to stop there. And I remember going, my grandfather thought he was looking after me, and I thought I was looking after him. And we went in, and I still remember at the third seat from the back on the right hand side, and we were at the aisle, and eventually they brought the coffin of the colonel in, and it scared the living daylights out of me, because there was six 6 feet odd pallbearers carrying his coffin, and his helmet and his sword was on top of that, and I said to myself, what am I doing here? I shouldn't be here at all. But anyhow, that's all I remember about the service. But we got out anyway, and I can't remember, but I was glad to get home in that score. But he died. But I also remember my uncle had things that now and again to leave at the house, and he'd motor down, and he says, just you go up to the back door and knock and hand that stuff into them, because they'll know what it is, and so forth. He was all around. But I also remember, and I think it might have been in about 35 or 36, there was some coronation or some celebration in the Royals, and there was one of them coming to the Seskinore, and the school children were invited up to the lawn at the McClintock estate, and we ran races and we played games, and at a certain time we were lined up along the side of the avenue up, and here this 2 big cars came, whoever was coming to the McClintock estate that day, and we clapped as we were told to do as they came up, and then they went into the house, so we were allowed to go home then, and that. But I remember that okay, and on many occasions after that, my uncle was up at the estate, and he knew them, and so forth. And then as the time went on, Reford, who was a relation of the colonel's, he took over, and I met him on a couple of occasions. They had a hunt in Seskinore, a very up-to-date hunt, and hounds, and they kept them there, and the horses. So the day that the hunt was set, they usually hunted over our fields. And I remember this particular day, they were coming down our back lane here at the house we live in now, and the Reford stopped the whole lot of the horses, and he was scolding like mad to the huntsmen and the whippers up and so forth, and he said, if I had only the colonel back for 15 minutes, I could buy and sell the whole lot of you. He would buy and sell the whole lot of you. But anyhow, after he dressed them down, the hunt went on ahead anyway, and so forth. But the hunt went on for quite a number of years, and it had a great following. There was no doubt about that. And then I met him the next time, because the electricity came to Oma, and Scots Mills, and the big house where the Scots lived in, they got electricity, and they had a lighting plant that had a diesel engine and a generator that made electricity, and it charged 17 very big water batteries. And my father bought these things and set it up, and it gave us light in the house. And my job was every Saturday morning I was detailed to start the engine and top up all the batteries, and there was a gauge to tell you when they were full. Then Reeford heard that we had this, and he arrived up to see it because he wanted to put them in as well. Whether he did or not, I don't know, but that's the only time I spoke to Reeford. But anyhow, his wife died early, and he wanted to keep her in the house, and they wanted her embalmed and put her in a glass case in the house, and they applied to the council for permission, but they turned him down. They wouldn't allow it, so he had this wee plot, and it's still there, way outside where the hall door was of the place, and they buried there. And some of the ashes of all the other relations came back and were buried in the same place down at the back. You can still see them if you go for a walk around the estate down there. And the McClintocks, they were missed about Seskinore because there was always something interesting, and they give big dinner parties. Tom Bell was always about the place, even when he was at school, and he was in the garden this day, and one of the ladies of the house shouted, "Thomas, have you any time in the garden?" "No," he says, "there's a clock up in the coach house, but I don't think it's working too well." She was looking for the vegetable time. He knew nothing about it. But also, Tom told me in later life that the Earl of Belmore was coming to dinner, and they had a party coming with him from Fermanagh, and they had a big table set, and they killed a lamb and cooked it, and they put spikes, and they had him sit up straight on the table, this cooked lamb, and come in, and then it was carved from there. Whoever did the carving, I don't know, but Tom reckoned that they could not eat this lamb anyhow, the whole of it. But he says when the dinner party was over, there was nothing, only the bones left. But the Earl of Belmore, I'm told, had a huge appetite and so forth. But then he give a fair bit of employment around the place as well, and the farm and so forth. So that was the workings of my time in the McClintock estate.
James, you're a well-travelled man. How has holiday travel changed? With the aeroplane, it has changed a lot. But when I was young, my father took us all to Port Stewart for 1 week every summer, and boy, we enjoyed building the sandcastles and bathing in Port Stewart Strand. But then when we got into our high teens, we went a bit further, and the first overseas trip I had with Tom Reid, a neighbour of mine here, we joined a young people's party and went on a bus all through England and all through the continent. We ended up in Germany, and we were most of a week there around Cologne and so forth, but we're in Bonn as well, and the Brandenburg Gate, and they visited schools, and we all got back safe. We had a great time on the continent at that stage. It broadened our outlook completely in that respect. And then another time later on, Norman Morrison and I went to the winter fair, the agriculture winter fair in Toronto, Canada, and to make a long story short, we were going round the poetry exhibition, and we were stopped looking at the ducks, and this lady came over, and who was it? Only Princess Anne, and she said hello, and I said hello, and she says, where do you come from? And I says, Northern Ireland. Oh, she says, I was there 2 days ago and it was raining. Well, I said, you could send some of these ducks over to that and they'll survive there all right. So she walked on, but it was lovely to say hello to her. But we had a great time in Canada, and we were at the Revolving Tower in Niagara Falls and had dinner up in the Revolving Restaurant, and we did a whole lot of things in Canada which I'll never forget. A great time. And then we went on down to Florida, and we spent a week there, and we bathed in the Gulf of Mexico, and we visited Al Capone. He was one of the gangsters. His big mansion there, and had something to eat there as well, and met a whole lot of different places and people in our American thing, and we were at Disneyland in Florida, and they took part in nearly all the fiddly things that were there, and so that was a good thing. But then in recent times, after we got married, and I never was keen on lying in the sun, so I've been to Canary Islands 3 or 4 times, but I would much prefer to go to the continent, and I've been in Austria and Switzerland, and if you count the both of them together, I suppose we're about 8 times, and between the 2 countries, and we loved it, and would still love to go back to it. But then later on, Mary thought she wanted to see the fjords in Norway, and we'll take a boat and go there. Well, I said, if you're going there, we'll take the best boat we can get, because if you don't like the first one, you never go again. And here, when we looked up the dates, the Queen Mary was going to Norway, to the fjords, and we booked and got on it. And we went to all the fjords up the north of Norway, and back home again, and that was one great holiday, and we met a lot of people, and they were in the same boat as ourselves, and we had a great time on that boat. So we fell in love with that, and we went the next year to the Mediterranean, and went to Rome and Italy, and visited another couple of towns in Italy, and of course we were at the Colosseum, and we were in the Vatican City as well, and we missed nothing, and we enjoyed ourselves immensely. And then we went to the next year the Canary Islands, and down there it's a long run down to the Canaries, but there was always something good going on, and they met a pair there, and yes, that was the crew. We met this chap there. You introduced yourself at the dinner table on the first night, and there was always, we said we'd always have 4 or 6 at our dinner table, and you introduced yourself, and this man and his wife were from Cambridge, and the other man and his wife were from Edinburgh. And where do you come from? Omagh, Northern Ireland. And this boy from Cambridge says, do you know Jim Riddle? And I says, I know, he's a good friend of mine. And I says, how do you know Oh, well, he says I own that auction mart in Cambridge, and Jim is nearly over at it every week in life,
Yes.
every month in life, and I know Jim very well. So we had a good pal. He and his wife, we trucked around different places and the Grand Canaria when we were down there, and then we the last cruise we had was back to the Mediterranean in Monte Carlo and Barcelona and around there. Mary wants to go again, but I don't think I'd pack my bag.
You need to
Yeah.
mention Jersey then. Have we started to go to Jersey?
Pardon?
You need to mention Jersey. Have we started from that
Oh,
on?
oh yes, you're quite right. And we started going to Jersey, and we fell in love with the hotel there in St. Bernard's Bay, the Bay Ritz. And when Mary counted up, we've been there 20 times. And so we'll likely go back some of these days, but we loved it out there. And it was a good place to swim and a lot of people that you knew and you could talk to there, and worked very, very well. But those were our holiday times, if that was
The hotel was nice, John, in that you could prepare for your swim and you just walk right down into the sea.
Oh,
and
yes.
then walk back up it was, and then a lovely view of the
Yes.
bay.
Yeah.
You know, it was very nice. That's St. Helens and Bernard's Bay.
Okay, I guess youth of today, if they don't spread their wings and go out and see the world in a sensible way, don't be just running away to lie in the sun, because that'll do you more harm. But get out and see the other world, how other people live, and it'll give you a different perspective to life. So I'd advise you to take every opportunity to travel around the world to see it. Come back home again now and bring your ideas with you. Okay.